global warming and climate change are no longer questionable. They are facts. The forecasts made in previous years have turned into realities. Yet what we experience today are nothing but the earliest signs. No doubt a great deal of damage has already been done, but we can work to mitigate the effect. And maybe, while we're at it, we can build a more just, low-carbon world in the ruins of the old. As the world gets warmer, the climate will continue to change, and some extreme effects we have witnessed will become more frequent. The underlying causes have never been clearer. As economies have grown, oil resources have become increasingly scarce, leading to wars, partly for oil, a desperate quest for so-called energy security, and techno-fixes, all designed to keep those economies growing. In a world driven by profit and committed to unlimited economic growth, little has been done to change the course of things. An increasing number of people recognise that there is no time to waste, and that solutions can only come from the people. Under the shadow of one of the biggest CO2 emitters in Europe, Drax coal-fired power station, 600 people from all walks of life set up a camp for climate action, for 10 days of learning, sustainable living and direct action. With over 100 workshops on a wide range of topics, the camp is a space to pool knowledge, ideas and inspiration to tackle the root causes of climate change.
I think this camp's been incredibly inspiring. It's just amazing seeing what people can do when they put their minds to it, you know, with hardly any money but lots of energy and imagination, and the people who've organised it have done an amazing job. I've basically been here since the beginning and seen it spring out of a field and become this really well organised, sustainable camp where people are living and working together. People have done a really good job of working on compost toilets and grey water systems and thinking about where energies come from. Obviously when you're setting up a camp very quickly, it's difficult to put a lot of systems in place, so you can't really harvest all the rainwater and, you know, do things that you would do on a longer term project. But I think it's a really good example of an alternative way to live, a low impact way to live. And hopefully, you know, we're learning how to make it better. So if we do such a thing again, we maybe have ideas of how to improve it for next time.
You know, we squatted this bit of land. It was an elaborate plan to squat. You know, a land squat in Britain is very difficult. We managed to do it. You know, before it happened, I just thought, is it possible? I didn't know. You know, if we can't get a bit of land, we can't do the camp, we can't do the workshop. Everything fails basically. So, you know, Wednesday morning, whenever it was, when it started setting up, you know, groups of people got here, got on the land. We erected marquees, we erected, you know, a big pole structure before the police even knew it was here. You know, that is just an amazing thing to do.
and that I think we have created a space where loads of people have turned up with huge amounts of variation of experience and have really got stuck in, from building compost loos to being involved in the legal support team. There's really no divisions here about people who've been more involved or less involved. Like, I do really believe this is now a collectively run camp, which is hugely exciting.
Okay, the aims of the camp are firstly to kind of bring together the people who are really concerned about climate change, the people who know that governments and corporations aren't going to sort it out for us and that we have to sort it out ourselves, to get those people together to talk about the issues, to talk about what kind of radical changes are needed, and to talk about how we can start to put them in place.
There has also been an acknowledgement that this is incredibly well organised. People are talking about the neighbourhood system. People are talking about the fact that we have consensus decision-making processes in our neighbourhoods, and we come together and we decide things in the camp. And I think that's been a real victory, that it hasn't just been about the action, that the fact this camp's been about workshops and education, it's been about collectively learning about the issues, and it's been about living in a sustainable way and showing that you can live a low-energy, sustainable way.
So we have a wind generator here, we have solar panels, we have compost toilets, and the waste from those toilets is going to a local farmer for his orchards. We also have recycling, so we're trying to actually live some of the alternatives that we're mentioning. And then the third aim is to take direct action against Drax Power Station. The stated aim is to try and shut down Drax Power Station.
Drax sits massively in the flatlands of Yorkshire, its towers and chimneys visible for miles. Its trails of steam and smoke for many more. It's the biggest power station in Britain. It generates 7% of the nation's electricity, 4,000 megawatts of power. It also generates 20 million tonnes of carbon dioxide every year, the equivalent of every car in Yorkshire. Managers at Drax say emissions have been reduced, and they too are concerned about climate change. But closing Britain's coal-burning power stations overnight would cause serious energy shortages and economic harm.
Drax Power Station is the biggest emitter of CO2 in the UK. Well, it consumes 13 million tonnes of coal every year. And whilst it portrays itself as a green, clean coal factory, there really is no such thing, and 13 million tonnes of coal can't be considered clean. There are 100 countries in the world that produce less CO2 than Drax does. So it's a major polluter. There's also the issue that as other sources are becoming scarce, there's quite a chance that governments might start to return to coal, which is the dirtiest source, the dirtiest way of producing energy. But however, there is a chance that governments will return to that, and we want to sort of get in there early and say this is not acceptable. You can't go back to coal because it is so polluting.
When I look at Drax Power Station, I'm looking at a dinosaur. I'm looking at something which, 1950s technology. It's based, all those cooling towers are pumping heat into the atmosphere, which could be used to heat buildings. The whole system is hopelessly inefficient and is using the most polluting fuel source known to man, which is coal.
Well, we've decided to make this giant ostrich for the protests this week because we're campaigning against the massive power station over there, and we're doing this whole camp about climate change, and one of the symbols for the camp has been this ostrich with its head buried in the sand, and it's this whole thing about people just wanting to ignore the problem and not facing up to it until it's too late. And we're asking people to pull their heads out of the sand and look at the reality of what's happening and take really drastic action to try and stop our world going to hell in a handcart. Okay, we can start. I do think it's really important to use art and creativity in protest, partly as a way of capturing people's imaginations and creating a vision of something different. And also, I mean, what we're going to do is make people laugh, and it's a way to reach out to the public and to people maybe who work at Drax who feel like it's a real affront on their lives and that we're kind of criticising them and that what we're doing is a real challenge to them. And it's actually, saying to them, it's not just about that. We're questioning the whole way that we're living in this society, but it's not a personal attack, and people need to be able to laugh, and people need to be able to talk to us and not have this massive wall between us. So I think it's a good way of breaking down barriers.
Well, at the moment we have seen less than 1 degree of global warming, and we're already seeing some fairly drastic transformations in both human societies and the Earth system, but they're only the very earliest signs. And with 1 degree of global warming, which we are already locked into, there's not much we can do to avoid that, and we will unfortunately see the extinction of most of the world's tropical coral reefs, because as ocean temperatures rise, the corals will be increasingly bleached out, and most of the tropical reefs will die off. We'll also see the mountain ranges losing more of their snow and ice, and this is going to affect fresh water supplies for people very directly. And some of the other very important natural ecosystems, which have a lot of endemic species in there, will lose a lot of their biodiversity. And so I think 1 degree is more of a danger really to plants and animals, in that we'll be seeing an increasing number of extinctions than just to human systems. I think we can survive and we can adapt to cope with it, which is just as well because it's already in the pipeline. If we move on to 2 degrees, we'll see probably the disappearance of most of the Andean glaciers, which will leave people in Peru and Bolivia without a manageable fresh water supply. And so we're going to be seeing tens of millions of people probably having to migrate to new areas because of that. And we'll also be seeing shifting of drought zones. The Mediterranean will be getting a lot hotter, and as a result of that, it may well be that people who live in southern Europe may be migrating to northern Europe as a result. If we move on up through the scale and we look at 3 degrees of global warming, that's when the really dangerous tipping points begin to come into play. If we reach 3 degrees, we're probably going to see the loss of the Amazonian rainforest ecosystem, which will release a lot more carbon into the atmosphere and of course destroy lots of plants and animals in the process. And so the real danger here is that once we've reached the tipping point of 3 degrees, that's going to inevitably bring on 4 degrees, 5 degrees, right the way on up the scale. So we have to stop below 2 degrees. Even the European Union agrees on this, although they don't agree how to do it, if we're going to avoid reaching some of these very critical tipping points. And the unfortunate situation that we're in, which illustrates the urgency of it and how important this climate camp and the campaigning activities are, is that we really only have 10 years to begin to bring down global emissions if we're to stay within the 2 degrees limit. And if we fail to do this, we reach 3 degrees, we lose the Amazon, we reach some of these positive feedbacks, then we're going to be seeing major sea level rises, we're going to be seeing a mass extinction of plants and animals, unparalleled really for the last several tens of millions of years. And that's going to affect humanity very directly as well, of course. If we move on up the scale 4 or 5 degrees, we'll be seeing large areas of the planet which are essentially uninhabitable as the zones of aridity, the deserts, begin to shift towards the poles. So this will be displacing people in their hundreds of millions and in their billions to places where it's going to be very difficult for people to be supported because there simply won't be enough food and there simply won't be enough water. And so really once we're facing that level of global warming, we're going to be seeing, I think, the essential collapse of human civilization. There's no way that we can actually organise human affairs in the way that we do now when entire countries are being pushed out of manageable existence. And at the very worst case scenario of going up to 6 degrees, the only way we can begin to really understand what that might mean is by looking back at Earth history when there's been previous warmer episodes of 6 degrees. And the one which I've focused on particularly is the end Permian warming episode, which killed off 95% of all of the species that were alive on Earth at the time. That was the worst mass extinction in the whole of Earth's history, and geologists call it the time when life nearly died. Now that was 6 degrees of global warming. That's what we're facing this century if we don't get our act together. So I think the message couldn't be any clearer that we need to see mass action on climate change urgently. We need to bring down emissions, and we need to start very soon.
We're a group of cyclists who, most of us did the ride up to Scotland last year to the G8 summit, and there were about 60 of us then. That was a really nice ride, and we decided that we wanted to keep on doing some cycling related activities as a group. So what we came up with was the idea of doing a road show, travelling up from London, which is what we've just done over the last 2 weeks, stopping in a number of towns and cities and running a bicycle roadshow. So doing things like fixing people's bikes, kids' bikes mainly, and getting them back on the road. So some of the other things we were doing were running beautiful bike workshops where kids can come along and decorate their bike and make little badges and things like that. And we also had a renewable energy trailer with things like a pedal generator, so you could get on and pedal away, power a Game Boy, power a bubble machine, and also charge the batteries. And the trailer was could show films from the trailer, so a little micro cinema thing like that. Hopefully the aim being to try and get people thinking about some of the wider issues beyond cycling and why cycling is important and how it fits into a sustainable pattern of living. It's a wonderful machine. It's the most efficient mode of transport possible, basically. It just has to become a more acceptable and normal part of everyday life, because cycling is still seen as a little bit weird, or like it's what you do if you can't afford a car. And it's about changing perceptions to make it seem what it is, which is a very practical and pleasurable activity as well as a functional form of transport.
And a group that I'm part of right now that's just starting is called Rising Tide North America. And we're basically a group that's trying to put together a radical voice about climate change issues, really focusing on commitment to direct action, looking at the roots of climate change, not saying like Al Gore, like let's buy our way to a better future, like buy a hybrid car, buy better light bulbs, but saying who are the companies and the industries that are causing this, and let's take it to the root and really like make some radical changes happen. And then there's also a really, really strong emphasis on anti-oppression and climate justice, which is really looking at which communities are most affected by climate change. Hurricane Katrina was a perfect example in a horrifying way of what kinds of realities we're going to be facing more and more, and the racism that's embedded in that, and really trying to build links with the communities that are affected on the extraction end, where coal's extracted, where oil's extracted, and then also the communities that are affected where these things are burned, like where are the coal refineries, power plants, these kinds of things. And then finally, who are the people who are worst affected by climate disasters, and really believing that a lot of the focus for building a movement against climate change will be coming from these communities that are most affected by it, and from that grassroots level, building strong networks and alliances, and building a strong movement from the bottom up.
This time last year, I was making a trip in Venezuela, and I had the privilege of going out to a place called Zulia, which is in the northwest corner of Venezuela. I was told about a resistance movement that was happening, and it's a resistance against coal mining, and it really kind of made me think about coal mining and the effect that it's having on people and communities across the world.
Hay muchos puntos, ahí está otro más adelante, otro más allá. ¿Dónde hay carbones? ¿Dónde vas a sacarlo? Ese ya me significa de ese punto.
Adentro de la laguna tiene otros de estas, sí. Adentro, la propia laguna ahí. Que es el agua que se toma, se va a tomar, se va a beneficiar al pueblo. Por eso que nosotros no aceptaríamos eso.
Carbones Guasare presenta su proyecto al mundo con un sentimiento grande de preservar un ambiente, de conservar la gente, de mejorarle la calidad de vida tanto a la gente como a las comunidades que están en el entorno a través de los puestos de trabajo a familiares de estos, garantizando así un proyecto lindo y hermoso, rasgando el suelo y la tierra para obtener un mineral que se transformará en la transformación de energía en otros países para desarrollo y crecimiento de Venezuela y el mundo.
30 años viviendo en este sitio y desde cuando ellos están aquí. Somos guayú. Los empresarios esos que vienen son gringos, son de España, son de no sé de a dónde.
Nosotros somos los auténticos dueños absolutos de esta tierra desde hace más de 1500 años.
Y esta es una herencia que nos dejaron de los antepasados y nosotros lo tenemos que pelear. Como aquellos no pudieron pelear, pero nosotros sí lo vamos a pelear con todos los corajes. Encima de quien sea, vamos a pelear. La única manera que ellos toman esto, que ellos nos manden a matar toditos.
Abuso de ilusos, ya no es confuso, es el imperio del intruso. Rehuso y rechazo al que arrasó con nuestra fauna. Su causa es absorber en mi tierra y la devasta. El poder, corporaciones manejan sin tener cuidado. El daño ya ha sido ocasionado. Nuestro mar y nuestra gente han sido despojados.
I know in Zulia it's about huge areas of primary rainforest tract being turned into open pit coal mining, and of course that has an effect because rainforests are used as a kind of carbon sink of in fact releasing more CO2 into the atmosphere. So that's absolutely disgusting. There's the effect on biodiversity and the loss of primary rainforest tract when there's so little of it on the planet, and the thing about coal mining is that once some have been set up, there are such huge kind of geological areas, if you like. If one coal mine is set up, then that kind of opens the way, paves the way for others to be set up. So it's really about losing such a huge area of beautiful tropical rainforest. Here were people who were living truly sustainable and CO2 neutral lives. There are so few people left on the planet who know how to live without causing climate change. And here are the people who we have so much to learn from. I mean, here in the camp, we're talking about, we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint, we're trying to reduce the amount of energy we use and only use renewables. But that's not new. There are people who have been doing this and who live extremely high quality lives, and it's those people's lives who are being jeopardized by the coal mining. I mean, the coal industry is the dirtiest way of producing energy. It is an expansion industry which is just obscene because there's a lot of spin around coal. This idea that comes out of companies, come out of the Drax PR spokeswoman and has come out of the government, that somehow coal can be clean. It's absolute rubbish. There's no space for coal or burning fossil fuels in any sort of future. And the idea that coal industry, and that's the coal power stations, that's the mining companies, are making profit from continuing to pump out CO2 into the atmosphere at the extent coal-fired power stations do, is absolutely revolting. This coal-fired power station needs coal, and that coal is coming from places. So to support resistance movements against the extraction of coal is to support resistance movements against Drax, and that's absolutely crucial.
We are in a competitive market and we need to maintain our competitiveness, but we are all across the industry very concerned about emissions, and we're all looking at investments that improve our efficiency and reduce our emissions or improve our renewable performance.
The threat of climate change isn't going to go away. Is it a worry of yours that protests like this will be repeated?
It's certainly a concern. I'm not sure that Drax is the right station to target, though. We are the cleanest and most efficient coal station in the UK, and I would hope that next time they choose a different target.
If you look at corporations, they're fighting tooth and nail to try and prevent the emissions that they have being reduced. So Drax is actually suing the EU at the moment and trying to increase its quota of how much it's allowed to emit. So corporations want to obviously make a profit, and they are prepared to do that at the expense of the environment. Governments are committed to continual economic growth, as they have been for a very long time, and they therefore cannot control the corporations because they won't address that one fundamental principle that maybe economic growth is part of the problem.
It's being given back to you anyway.
Yeah. But the reason it was seized for those 10 minutes, if you wrote down the reason why you seized it in the first place?
We don't need
well, you do, because it was going to. You said it was going to be used for criminal damage.
It's described in the
The police have said that they're coming on site at 2:15. Site's opinion constantly has but that they do not want the police on at all. The police have been trying to oppose an agreement, so I came back with conditions for entry. The police weren't particularly interested in that, although they now have since agreed to some of those conditions. However, the site as a whole feels that, you know, this is our community, this is our space, we've created it, it's a temporary autonomous zone. So a number of people have decided that they want to protect the space in a peaceful, passive way.
If the police want to come in, somebody's got to be committing an arrestable offense, which we can handle ourselves if it happens, or they've got to have a warrant. If there's no circumstances I can see, other than those, where the police can come in.
Tipping points are points of no return. They're the temperature rise, which if we get to that temperature rise, certain extremely serious, irreversible climatic changes occur. And even if we come back down, if we reduce the temperature down or we reduce carbon emissions, that process will carry on. It's a point of no return. There are quite a few tipping points. One, for example, is the melting of the Greenland ice sheet. Now, if the entire Greenland ice sheet melts, sea levels will rise by about 7 meters, which is a huge rise. I mean, most coastal areas, coastal cities will be underwater. Now, if we reach a temperature change around 2 degrees above where we are now, then the melting processes that will be set up within the Greenland ice sheet will be such that they will be unstoppable. Even if we reduce the temperature back down, the ice sheet will continue to melt until it completely disappears. And this is due to the ice starting to melt. It lubricates the surface between the ice and the ground, and the ice sheet starts to move off Greenland and into the sea, and once that passes a certain point, it will be unstoppable, and that point is around 2 degrees above where we are now.
We've got lots of information here about all kinds of amazing activism and actions that have taken place and that will take place, but also in the centre of it we've got this amazing examples of what we call the art of resistance, and the project is called Art Not Oil. It came out of our opposition to the way oil companies buy themselves a clean reputation by sponsoring big cultural events in London, and we thought that was a really good way to jam the pervasive signal that these oil companies are putting out that they are friends of the planet and friends of the people, which is an absolute and outright lie. We thought that this was a useful place where we could come in and jam that signal, first with confrontation, but then we thought we ought to create something that goes in its place, and we ought to celebrate our creativity and the creativity of our defiance and of our resistance. So 3 years ago we invited artists from all around the world to contribute work. And here we are 3 years later in the third year of our exhibition, which is partly timed to coincide with BP's sponsorship of what they call the BP Portrait Award. And each year we open up in opposition to that and to cast light and shadow, as we say, on the oil industry. and then that exhibition, the BP exhibition, travels around the UK, and wherever it goes, we go. And as well as doing that, we are invited to various alternative spaces. We go to community centres, we go to pubs, we go to bars, and we go more or less where people will invite us. This is a non-commercial operation, it's a not-for-profit operation, but what we're asking is the enormous creative potential that there is out there from people who make visual and all kinds of other art, that they can actually use the work that they make and their wonderful creativity to get on board this movement for saving the planet and for freeing us all and for creating climate justice around the world. And the call is being heard and is being answered. If we can keep it going, and hopefully it will in all kinds of different ways, and it has to move and be fluid and change and grow each year, if we can keep that energy going, I think it's going to be a really powerful resource in the years to come.
And there you have it. Now I need to make about 50.
50 of them?
I reckon. I don't know, they've got to cover that ostrich. Maybe not 50. Yeah.
So it's a fun length.
Well, I'm just...
So this, for example, is going to be the neck of the ostrich, which I think you've been told about before. So this is all made out of reclaimed plastics and plastic bags. Can I stand back?
I live in the village of Campbellsforth, which is the next village to Barlow, and we're actually in the vicinity of Drax. We live in the vicinity of the Drax power station.
Mm-hmm. Why did you come to the camp?
Because we'd had an invitation. A very nice letter came through our door, Camp for Climate Action. It spelt out what you were doing, why you were here. We've read a lot of publicity, we've heard lots of rumours, and we said when we received this letter, it was a very nice letter of invitation, it was very clear, so we decided to take up your invitation and come and see you.
Mm-hmm. And what is your opinion about this camp?
It's very well organised, people are very friendly, they're not pushy. When we're interested in something they will help us, but nobody's pushed us into anything. We just hope that all will go well on Thursday. We hope there won't be any sort of nasty confrontation. We just hope it goes on like it is now. You make your point. I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian minister, and in the church we have many conferences about climate change. We're very concerned about it. The thing in the church, I think sometimes we spend our times in conferences talking to each other and not to the outsiders, and what I admire you're doing, you're actually talking to people outside as well as just to yourself, because if you only talk to yourselves, you're not going to do very much.
I think the wind farms, what they're proposing, wouldn't cope with all the our needs for our electricity. It's like cars. Everyone uses cars, and they're emitting more fumes, I think, bad gases into the environment.
And do you think we can sustain that standard of living with so many cars and so many energy consumption?
Probably not in the future. No. I just want to know what is the solution if they close down the power stations. What's the solution, really? What are we going to do for all the electricity we need?
Well, I think we have some of the solutions. I mean, we need to embrace renewable energy on a huge scale. Ideally, it would be locally based, so people would produce their own energy. They'd have their own wind turbines, their own solar power, etc., etc. So that's one possible. But I think what we have to state is that that's not going to be enough on its own. We probably can't produce enough energy to live the lifestyles we live at the moment using solar power and wind power. We have to dramatically change our lifestyles. We have to start living a relocalization, I suppose, of how we live, so that the food we buy is from a small radius area around where we live rather than being shipped from the other side of the world. That relocalization process would ideally involve a increased participatory democracy where people actually have control over their energy sources and over their food production, so that people would become more involved in the major decisions that need to be made, rather than having it, as it has been in the past, from a centralized government.
I need to as well, but
but the reality of the situation is that we're moving ever more rapidly in the wrong direction. And an analogy that I would use is of a ship heading towards the rocks, and the crew of the ship, which is us as humanity, are very unwilling to change the course of the ship. So they try everything else. They say, well, we can't change the course of the ship, we must keep burning fossil fuels, and so they try and move the rocks, or they try and change the air or something. They're desperate to come up with a technological fix which doesn't involve changing the course of the energy economy. And that really is the only option available to us. We can't techno-fix engineer our way out of this, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, but it kept it was when I was saying as well, it's like when it's too watery.
It's difficult to know what will happen tomorrow because we're not there yet, and I think plans are being formulated as we speak. Different groups will be going off and taking affinity group actions on different bits of Drax. There will also, I imagine, be a large mass action where people from the camp who have maybe not done things before will get involved. I think the authorities are saying that this is an inappropriate action to take, but if you look back through history, there have been lots of times where people have had to break the law in order to achieve a morally superior end, I suppose. And I'm thinking there of things like the suffragettes. The suffragettes used direct action, and in the end they managed to get the women to have the vote, which is, it was obviously what they were doing was the right way to go about it. And I think again and again there are lots of examples of that, and it's the same situation here. Laws have been made in the past which are maybe no longer that appropriate, and people possibly need to break them in order to say, no, this isn't acceptable. We're not prepared to let the planet burn over this.
Where do you want to do them? So I dangle you upside down and you do them. What, use you my paintbrush? Do my paintbrush.
Day of action against carbon emissions. Hundreds of protesters have marched on the Drax power station near Selby in an attempt to shut it down, but so far have found their paths blocked by police. Well, our reporter Carl Dinnan is there now. Carl.
Well, Krishna, joining me now is Leo Murray, who's a climate change activist and who we followed across some of the fields today. Leo, many people will regard this place as essential to the nation. It provides so much of our electricity. Why do you want it shut down?
Because the energy that's produced here is not energy that we need to live. It's energy that we need to live in the way that we've become accustomed to. And unfortunately for all of us, that is not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. It's something everybody needs to accept.
But it's the way we live now. We can't just shut it down and suddenly expect everyone to change.
No, indeed. But I think that everybody that's come to protest today has an understanding that thinking that governments and corporations are going to solve this problem for us is a fantasy, and they're not going to do that.
Very briefly, do you expect to see the law broken here today, and is it ever justifiable for this sort of protest?
I would expect the law to be see the law be broken here today, and of course it's justifiable. History will spit on those of us in this generation who did nothing to avert this disaster.
Okay, Leo Murray, thank you for joining us, and we'll be keeping across the protests throughout the day. Krishnan.
Carl Dinnan in North Yorkshire.
Started off with a kids' march and a procession with a lovely big ostrich, and they stopped us at the gate, and there's about 100 police from all over the country, and they don't want us to go any further, but I think they've radioed through for a cordon so that we can march to the station now. And it's really important that we do things like this, that we take direct action, and that we let people know, try and get the message out about climate change, because the government isn't doing anything and voting isn't working, so we have to do something for ourselves.
It's about adults walking down the street talking about something that they care about. Yeah? What do you care about? Think about it for one moment in your life. What do you really care about? This is oppression.
Police up here to protect this country lane because there wasn't enough crime going on in London, but they heard there were some children marching on the Drax power station, so they've come up here today to stop the kiddies from walking down the lane. And I want to say to every taxpayer, I think it's good to know that our children's future is being protected in this way.
The future! Clean energy right now! Clean energy for the future! Clean energy right now! Clean energy for the future! Clean energy.
And I know that sort of when I've been sort of preparing and going out on actions this week, and there's kind of moments where you kind of feel a little bit wobbly and you think, oh, you realise you're putting some things at risk, you might have to spend a night in the police cell, and then you just put it into that context of the things that people are willing to fight for and the extent to which people are willing to fight. People across the world are involved in struggles that mean they put a lot more on the line than spending the night in a police cell in the UK. And thinking about the international context can only give us strength.
Maybe we need to find some wings. Should we go on a swing?
Today is Drax's quit date.
We're carrying this patch. It's a fossilette patch. It helps withdrawal from fossil fuels.
We're going to help Drax to give up smoking with that fossilette patch by sticking it on the top of that big tower there.
I think this camp can be a really good start for kicking off a movement, and we really need to kick that movement off farther. I think we really need to look at why this camp is so white, and that's a huge problem that I haven't seen really addressed that much here. I think since this is an issue that affects the entire world needs to participate in the conversation about what the solutions are. And oftentimes I think when it gets framed as an environmental issue, that usually means white, middle-class, environmental kinds of issues that can kind of play into the same structures that have caused the problem in the first place.
The point is that us, there's people in this camp, are not going to change the world. But every now and then, something like this, an event like this, can spark a really big, serious social movement. And, that's the only thing that ever changes the world, basically. Experts never change the world, social movements do.
We have smashed the capitalist machine. Burning gasoline on the future is a thing.
We're going through the woods. People who left us.
But I think a lot of times people look at this within the form of how can we keep our society going, how can we get back on our feet. And I've been really looking at it like the combination of peak oil and climate change is it's incredibly unsustainable, and it's like this beast, this machine that's gobbled up the world in the past 500,000, however far back you want to look. This machine is stumbling now. And I think rather than trying to find the quick fix solutions, like the energy drink, what other alternative source can we find to get things back to normal, or even if we decrease our energy, get things back so that things work out well. And I think we really need to be looking at this as a peak opportunity. Peak oil climate change as a place to really trip this machine up and knock it flat on its face, and kind of stop this nightmare that's been plaguing this planet for too long now.
We're just here at the moment where the railway curves around the outside of the coal heaps, and this thing here is a huge greenhouse. The campsite is way up here somewhere. Where has it gone here? And this morning we've had a bit of a tour all around here and come down this road and then gone back into all these fields, and people have been split up and converged again, and we've had a bit of noise around the fence here, but no one's breached it en masse, although a few people have gone over. And we're just regrouping for lunch and deciding what to do next.
Well, 4 people have been arrested today at Britain's biggest coal-fired power station as campaigners try to shut it down. According to the Climate Camp, who organised the protest, a further 7 campaigners have managed to get inside the Drax power station in North Yorkshire, and they've tied themselves to a light tower. The police, however, are denying that there are any protesters inside the station.
Tell us what you did on Thursday.
Okay, well, first thing Thursday morning, about 5 o'clock, we climbed over the fence into Drax power station, and then we legged it towards the floodlight tower, and we climbed up the tower, and Lou locked on at the bottom. Then we stayed there for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. We climbed back down again because we realised we weren't making much difference there. So after that we legged it and ran towards some machines which process slag, and called a boom slanger machine, I think, and we ran onto the machine. We were chased by a police officer. We ran to the end of the machine. There was a metal cage over it. The police officer switched it off. We climbed on and locked on, and we were there for about maybe 3.5 or 4 hours. And we managed to shut down the machine for that whole time. It was off for that whole time. Yeah, and our aim really was, as I explained to the police officer, it wasn't to commit any kind of damage. It was just to stop the machine, and I think we succeeded in doing that for a considerable period of time. You know, people did get in there, and it wasn't that difficult. And you know, if you plan it well enough in advance and look at exactly what you want to do and do it, you can achieve a hell of a lot. Definitely. And we didn't have a plan before we came here. And we only met each other here at the camp. So I think that's pretty amazing, really. Yeah. So you can, you know, affinity groups don't have to be sort of like people who know each other really well. You know, you can form affinities while you're here, and that's what I've learned, I think. Brilliant. I think what I would say is that you think that you don't have any power, but when you you do something, you do have power. You can change things. You can confront things that you think you can't, and it's really important to sort of take that on, and it's just an incredibly positive and empowering experience, getting together with like-minded people and getting out there and fighting for what you believe in, really.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It's that irony of we were the ones in jail, but it was the police who were the slaves. They have to do their job. They're all grumpy. They hate the overtime. We're the ones who are free, even when they lock us up.
Yeah.
So why are we here and what are we up to?
We're waiting to get into Drax to shut it down.
Are we having any luck so far?
Yeah, there's been a few people who've got in, yeah, but we're just looking for a rest. It's a long, slow business shutting UK's biggest power station down, but no doubt it will shut down whether we're here or not. It's just a matter of speeding it up to make it better on us all.
Why is it going to shut down?
Because soon enough the problems will get so bad that everyone will realise it's a bloody stupid thing to be burning fossil fuels at the rate we're burning them, and we're going to have to get our energy from somewhere else and learn to do with less stuff.
aggravated on the bloody way along.
Well, I think this is a really important step. It's not the answer though. The answer is people to replicate this kind of awareness raising process not only all over the UK but all over the world, and get our leaders to recognise that we're in a very serious state of affairs and we need to take radical action. I'd like to say yesterday, but obviously that's not possible. We need to bring organisations and countries together and make things happen.
Oh, my legs seem to have got a bit heavy. Oh, what? Oh, where did you come from? Oh, muscle! Woo! Push it!
When I talk about this, people often do tend to respond with a sort of sense of despondency and despair because the threats are so severe. But actually I think that's a flawed psychological reaction. It's a bit like sitting in your kitchen, seeing your living room's on fire and saying, oh, how depressing, rather than grabbing hold of a fire extinguisher and putting the fire out. You know, you don't just sit there and watch the planet burn and say it's depressing when you still have the options of avoiding that situation getting any worse. And I think we still have the levers in our grasp to reduce emissions, and therefore we have the levers in our grasp to reduce the warming. That's undeniable, and therefore we shouldn't be despairing at this point. Otherwise we'll be losing the battle before we've even started fighting it.
I just think it's really exciting to see what people can do when they put their heads together, and I think you need an element of everything. You know, you need creativity, you need people who think about engineering, you need people who understand energy, you need people who are really interested in compost and shit and what happens to it, and like all together you can make something like this happen. It's not something you can do on your own, and I really think that the only hope for us in the future is to learn to work together in communities and build things and learn how to basically survive together.
Just kind of like the birth of a new movement, and we're going to see where that goes, and hopefully we've got, well, not good things coming. I mean, I think we're facing some really drastic, horrible things coming up in the world, but hopefully we can put together alternative infrastructure, build a new world out of the shell of the old, and as things fall apart, as economies collapse, we can start building vibrant communities that can be sustainable and can be self-sufficient, can defend themselves, and can really like become the next thing. So it's an exciting time to be alive, as horrifying as it is.
I think there is really still hope. I mean, we've got, 5-10 years to sort this out, and I think it's absolutely immediate, the kind of time frame in which we have to be working. But if we're not going to sort this out, then then this is the issue. There is no ifs or buts or maybes about this, and I think this has been a great start to what I'm hoping is going to be a really exciting new social movement.
Can I take one last question, thank you?
Without trivialising the thing, what happened to the ostrich?
What have you done with the offensive material that you found inside it?
We've seized the offensive material because we believed it was for use in criminal damage, and the ostrich, as is where it lay at the side of the road.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.